There's this adage out there that sequels are very rarely as good as the originals, but this part two may just take the Packers to the promised land. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Lombardi Time Brews, where I'm your host, John Delray. Today we got two things that we're going to discuss. Yes, I'm going to finish up the Green Bay Packers schedule because on Friday I did one video and I'm going to link it down in the description below. So if you happen to miss that video on Friday where I went through the first half of the Packers schedule, be sure to check that out. But I'm definitely going to do the second half of the Packers schedule today, starting off with Week 10 when the Green Bay Packers visit the Pittsburgh Steelers. After I get through the schedule and I explain the rationale for the wins and losses that I see coming as it stands right now, then I'm going to save the last few minutes to talk about Jordan Love. Yeah, the new franchise quarterback who accidentally made a whole lot of waves yesterday on Father's Day because a whole lot of people don't understand context once again. Speaking of Father's Day, if that holiday at all applies to you, I hope you had an absolutely fantastic day. Whether you're father, grandfather, serve as a father to someone, whatever it may be, I hope it was a wonderful day and it was what you needed it to be, whatever that means for you. So let's dive in. As I mentioned earlier, Green Bay Packers at Pittsburgh Steelers Week 10. Now, one other little preface that I'm just going to throw on here, the divisional games, because I did talk a lot more extensively about them in part one. I'm not going to cover them as much here, just some quicker rationale. But if you're looking for analysis of the division rival rosters, again, make sure you check out part one of this video series going over the Packers 17-game schedule. But Week 10, Packers at Steelers, they head to Pittsburgh to take on what I consider to be their sister franchise. And why is that the case? Well, the Pittsburgh Steelers are known for their continuity, right? Maintaining onto the head coach for a long time, the GM, ownership structure. They've been around for a long time. I mean, the Steelers just feel like the AFC version of the Green Bay Packers. Also, one of the NFL's smaller markets to boot. But on the field, there's some similarities. Again, you've got a young quarterback who's there after moving on from a franchise legend for the Steelers, of course, Big Ben. You've got an up-and-coming wide receiver, Pickens for the Steelers, Watson amongst others for the Packers. Quality offensive line. Steelers went so far as to upgrade, I think you could say, 2 of their starting 5 on that offensive line. PFF considers it one of the better offensive lines in football. So they're developing that way. They did it by signing Isaac Sumalo from the Philadelphia Eagles. They also drafted Broderick Jones in the first round. They have name recognition on their defense. Even though there's questions about that defense, there's still recognition there with TJ Watt, Hayward, Minka Fitzpatrick. And then even a bunch of their draft picks were picks that you saw really commonly mocked to the Packers, including Broderick Jones, Keanu Benton, Joey Porter Jr., and how about what I crowned as the Packer pick himself and then fell a lot, Darnell Washington, the tight end from Georgia. Look, last year, the Pittsburgh Steelers, to talk about the matchup this year, last year they finished as a top 10 scoring defense and a bottom 11 scoring offense. The defense doesn't look like it's going to fall off. It very well could be a top 10 unit again. They did do some work renovating their secondary. Gone is Witherspoon, amongst others. But then they brought in Patrick Peterson, KZ, former Packer Chandon Sullivan is there to help in the slot. Offensively, they're looking to take a step forward. Kenny Pickett now in year 2 of starting games. You've got Najee Harris, their running back, looking to return more so to his rookie form than last year. They added veteran presence Allen Robinson to their wide receivers to go along with Deontay Johnson and George Pickens. So this is an offense is looking to step forward. And it's a team in transition, much like the Packers have found themselves in. But I guess my overall argument here is why I think the Packers may fall here in Pittsburgh is because while both teams are in transition, the Steelers feel a year ahead. Packers are more talented at some positions, certainly. But the Steelers, if we're on similar trajectories, feel like they're a little bit farther ahead in their path of transitionship, while the Packers are brand new at this thing. Packers may be a more dangerous team, however more inconsistent. Steelers are steadier, safer, and they do take it at home, meaning the Green Bay Packers fall to 5-4. Remember, from the part 1 of this video, the Packers were 5-3. They had just come off of a win against the Rams, so now losing here to the Steelers drops them to 5-4. Week 11, Chargers at Packers. And let me just say first and foremost, thank the Lord, hallelujah, this game is in Green Bay for a change. The Packers do not have to venture out to the West Coast to take on the Chargers, what could also be known as the J.K. Scott revenge game, as he's the punter for the Chargers. Chargers feel like they just perennially should be a contender. They have all the firepower in the world. They keep on adding to it in the draft, and yet something goes wrong for them every single year. Feels like they could be in a shootout every game this year, too. You know, they've got Herbert, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, Mike Williams. But the question is always seeming to be health with this team. Yet defensively, they built around the pass rush. They've got Khalil Mack. They've got Joey Bosa. And amongst other little players, I shouldn't say little, in amongst different players at the different phases. But their defense is built around Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. They also did sign this offseason Eric Kendricks from Minnesota to be a steadying presence in the middle of that defense. Still, though, this was a bottom 10 unit in scoring defense last year and a bottom 12 in defensive yardage, bottom 6 in rush defense. They do have a lot of name recognition in that defense, Derwin James, Asante Samuel Jr., but they just don't have a lot of results, nor is their defense anything particularly scary. To me, this game is really going to come down to health. As I mentioned, a lot of the Chargers' star players have had difficulty staying healthy, and how injured they are by week 12 may very well determine the outcome of this game. Players having missed at least 6 games for the Chargers within the last 3 years. Now, this isn't necessarily like they missed those games while playing for the Chargers. Could have been when they were with the previous team. Nonetheless, still is a part of current Chargers, their players' history, right? So missing at least 6 games in the last 3 years, you've got Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, Rashawn Slater, Derwin James, and J.C. Jackson. Just headlining the list. Once you get down into the depth, there's even more guys than that. So by the time we get to week 12, the Chargers, if that health bug comes to bite them again, could be pretty problematic for them. If by this point in the season, if the Green Bay Packers offense can actually gel, if the Chargers run defense, which they really didn't address much beyond just getting Eric Kendricks, continues to be deficient, and the Chargers face their, I don't want to say it, but kind of typical array of injuries, then that could lessen their firepower, and this game could go the way of the Green Bay Packers, especially at home. Because of that, Packers win and move to 6-4. In week 12, Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to you, Green Bay. You get to face the division favorite Detroit Lions for the second time this season on only 4 days rest. Happy Thanksgiving. So much to be thankful for with that scheduling quirk. So again, look, this is the second time this year. Both times they're playing Detroit. They come off of just 4 days worth of rest. They play on a Sunday, then they play again on Thursday to go against their division rival. This time it's in Detroit. It's on Thanksgiving. I hate this. The Lions are beginning to build a streak against the Packers. They pick up another win. Packers just always seem to lose their mind against Detroit, right? It feels like there was that streak a few years ago where that happened with Marvin Jones catching everything in sight. Well, now he's back just to add to it as Detroit's working on building a new streak against Green Bay. I don't know. Packers fall on Thanksgiving Day. They lose and slip to 6-5. Now, week 13, in my opinion, one of the more interesting games of the schedule. Look, it's Chiefs at Packers. They've got a nice long break heading into this game from November 23rd up to December 3rd. Seems like it's one of the easiest games on the schedule to predict. It's the reigning Super Bowl champs against a team that's in transition. The Chiefs are off of their bye. Andy Reid, coming off of a bye as a coach, has a record of 27-4. He's basically the worst possible coach you can go against coming out of their bye. But in some ways, the Kansas City Chiefs, at least to me, having won another Super Bowl, are beginning to look a little reminiscent of those early 2010s Packers. Still the favorite in darn near every single game that they're going to play, but eventually they begin to get picked at. That roster begins to lose more and more names that you may recognize, more and more players who fill vital roles. Then they got to ask internal guys to step up and fill the void. The Chiefs this offseason have lost Frank Clark, Orlando Brown, who they replaced with Donovan Smith coming off of his worst career year, giving up 6 sacks last year, now going to be protecting Patrick Mahomes' blind side. They also lost Juju Smith-Schuster, Juwan Thornhill, and McCole Hardman. So Orlando Brown, certainly a good tackle. The rest of those names are just quality players who filled vital roles for the Chiefs. So no, did they lose their super studs? Of course not. But did they lose contributors? Yes, and I'm not quite sure that they filled the void adequately, just like we've seen happen with this kind of talent drain that always seems to happen with Super Bowl winners. In 2021, as another point, the Green Bay Packers, led by Jordan Love, marched into Kansas City and only lost by 6 in a game that was not at all designed for Jordan Love to be quarterback. And I think, again, considering that the Packers did shut down the Chiefs' offense the last time they played, I think there's a chance here. Can they match up well and shock everyone? I mean, it's possible. And at least the matchup on paper, in my mind, warrants a lot more thought than most people are at least going to give consideration to. But Love is young. And Andy Reid's defenses, even though he doesn't coach defense, his defenses are historically menacing against young quarterbacks. Coming out of a bye, the Packers are going to hang. But I think it's just too much to overcome right now. Chiefs pick up the win. Packers fall down to 500, sitting at 6-6. Moving on to Week 14, it's Packers at Giants. Yes, the Packers head to New York to take on the Giants. Last year, they lost to the Giants in London in what was maybe one of the most frustrating losses of the entire year. It felt like in that game, the Packers just made baffling decision after baffling decision. And I recall in my post-game video for that game going off about what are you doing? Late in the fourth quarter, just run the ball. Eventually, you just got to line up and say that you are better than the other team and just run the ball down their throats. And yet, the Packers didn't want to last year. But, not to dwell on the past too much, the Giants this year, to their benefit coming out of a playoff season, made some quality improvements. They added Darren Waller at the tight end position. They revamped their wide receiver depth. They added Bobby Okereke from Indianapolis at one of their worst defensive positions of inside linebacker. They drafted Deonte Banks to be a boundary corner for them. Other than that, though, the Packers last year, just looking at whole year stats, Giants made the playoffs, Packers did not. And yet, the Packers, in terms of scoring offense, were the superior team. They finished better than the Giants in scoring defense. According to DVOA, stat produced by Football Outsiders, if you're at all a believer in DVOA, the Giants overperformed by a mile. In fact, by far the most substantial margin in football. They had 8 one-score victories last year, and it took a career year from quarterback Daniel Jones just to hit that threshold. Utilizing DVOA, the New York Giants should have had the first pick in this year's draft, and yet they overachieved last year's projections all the way to being a playoff team. So where does that leave us? Well, logic dictates that Daniel Jones should regress, right? How can you have a career year every year? But at the same time, they did a nice job insulating their quarterback with more quality weapons. Adding Darren Waller, improving the wide receiver depth, including with Jalen Hyatt, a wide receiver that the Packers supposedly had their eyes on in the draft. Another counterpoint to the counterpoint is that PFF considers the Giants' offensive line, in spite of having left tackle Andrew Thomas, to be one of the worst 5 offensive lines in all of football. Sure, the Giants did improve this offseason. Did they take a massive leap? No. But I also think that their record last year, much like the Vikings, was unsustainable to a degree. 8 one-score victories is certainly outside of the norm, don't you agree? And can they do that again? It's doubtful. So here's what I'm saying. The Giants ultimately improved their roster. Last year, they had some unsustainable excess, propelling them to a place that no one realistically thought they would go to. So what do you have? You ultimately, at the end of the day, have an evening out. I think the Giants probably finish right about where they were last year. Better roster, worse luck, going to wind up about where you were. Regardless, in my opinion, the Packers this time aren't going to be bamboozled by a long flight. Aaron Rodgers' production in London is certainly replaceable by Jordan Love. It wasn't exactly one of Rodgers' better games. And so old knees aren't going to lock up on the plane like geriatric softball players and not going to expect that the Packers will actually win against the Giants. They break their 2-game skid and move their overall record to 7-6. Taking us to Week 15 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is not the Buccaneers of old. Tom Brady's gone. Nightmare Scotty Miller is gone. Shaq Mason is gone. But what's left still is a number of veterans who are quite capable. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Levante David, Antoine Winfield Jr., Jamel Dean even re-signed this offseason. But the roster itself is going to be led by one of two options, be it Baker Mayfield, who the Packers have seemingly had his number for a while, or Kyle Trask. And Kyle Trask is even more of an unknown than the Packers quarterback himself. So ultimately here, what do you do with this game? Buccaneers are certainly taking a step back from leaving Tom Brady to what is Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask. And it does feel like the Packers coming off of a win against the Giants. I mean, look, I have them on a 2-game skid, then they pick up a win against the Giants. Kind of feels like this again could be falling backwards. But it's difficult to see the Packers losing to a Buccaneer team that's frankly having a worse transition from franchise great than the Packers are. The Buccaneers did have a quietly nice offseason. They were able to retain franchise leader Levante David, able to retain cornerback Jamel Dean, like I said. But it's really difficult to say that this team really improved anywhere. They're expected to have a bottom-tier offensive line after trading away Shaq Mason. I just don't see it adding up. They're still incredibly strong at wide receiver. Their running game may be competent, even though Leonard Fournette left. Still, though, do you have any faith in the Buccaneers being a quality team this year like they've been? I don't know. Maybe Evans or Godwin beat the Packers back 7. It's possible, but I don't think it's likely. You know, I mentioned earlier that the Steelers feel ahead in their transition versus the Packers in theirs. Well, the Packers feel ahead in their transition over the Buccaneers. So the Green Bay Packers win, and they jump to 8-6. Week 16, Packers at Carolina, Christmas Eve. Speaking of a team in transition, look no further than the team that had the number 1 pick in this year's draft, the Carolina Panthers. They also did sign a bunch of veterans at the same time. Like, they're not going totally young. They wanted to surround Bryce Young with some quality vets. They went out and they signed Adam Thielen. They signed DJ Shark from the Lions. They also added Miles Sanders from the Eagles to be their new running game. They thought that would be an upgrade over running back Donta Foreman, who eventually signed with Chicago. And they did a nice job giving Bryce Young kind of this cushion. They also signed Andy Dalton to be Young's backup. And maybe by this time, maybe things have gone south and Dalton is starting. But all reports out of Carolina say that this is going to be Bryce Young's job from week 1. And they're just going to weather the storm regardless. The Panthers are always going to be a quality running team. It seems ingrained in their DNA. They do have a quality offensive line centered with Bradley Bozeman at the center position. Taylor Moton, one of the best pass blocking, right tackles in football. But they didn't add exactly lights out weapons either. Shark, Thielen, they still have Laviska Shenault, who they traded for from Jacksonville. So Young does have capable players around him, but nothing incredible. By the way, just as a reminder, the Panthers also drafted Jonathan Mingo, just to further rub that in for Packer fans who wanted Mingo. Defensively, they didn't exactly lose a bunch, but they didn't exactly gain a bunch either. They added Von Bell to be in their safety position, giving them a pretty strong secondary. But at every other phase in their defense, there are questions. So they've got a new defensive staff, whole new coaching staff, actually. New head coach is Frank Reich. Defensive coordinator would be Evero, who was the defensive coordinator in Denver, one of the top defenses in the league last year. And Carolina's switching from what they've been historically a 4-3 now to a 3-4, which may help open up their pass rush in the form of Brian Burns, amongst others. Coming off 2 straight wins, we're on the road, we're on the holiday, it's Christmas Eve. It just feels, I know I just said all of that, like, oh, that sounds like a Packers win. All of that's bad for the Panthers. Well, sometimes the Packers lose games that they just have no business losing. And I think this is going to be one of them. I think they could get caught off guard. It's just one of those games where just nothing's going to work quite right. So the Packers fall to the Carolina Panthers, their record shifting to 8-7. Week 17, Packers at Vikings. This is New Year's Eve. This is Sunday Night Football. You know what else it is? It's also primetime Kirk Cousins, which we all know is a terrible quarterback. He has this notorious reputation for, if it's 12 o'clock p.m. Kirk Cousins, he's above average. If it's primetime Kirk Cousins, ruh-roh, Vikings aren't going to do too well. Now, I will offer the counterpoint that over the last 3 years, Kirk Cousins has gotten at least one game from the Packers every year. And earlier, if you check out part 1, I do have the Packers winning at Lambeau earlier in the season. And especially coming off of a loss to the Panthers, Joe Barry's seat is beginning to get a little warm again. Still, though, without going too much into the Vikings roster since I already did that, Joe Barry's dials it up, national game, primetime Kirk makes his appearance, and the Packers get back to chasing the playoffs. If the Packers can hold the Vikings offense, basically just Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, rookie Jordan Addison, and Alexander Mattison, if they can hold that, then the Packers should have no problem scoring on what is certain to be a very, very leaky defense, especially if Danielle Hunter is gone. And the Packers sweep the Vikings, moving to 9-7. Now, week 18. Holy crap, 9-7. 9-7. The Green Bay Packers are well positioned for the playoffs, aren't they? And all they have left is the Chicago Bears coming to Lambeau. Bears at Packers, week 18 to close out the year. We have no idea what time this game is going to be at. Could be flexed. Who knows? But at the same time, this could go down as absolutely positively one of the most frustrating games of the year. Packers are looking pretty well set for the playoffs at 9-7. And the Bears want nothing more than to absolutely destroy that for Green Bay. In week 1, the Bears and all of their new acquisitions at darn near every position on the field are still figuring out how to play together, while the Packers come in ready to go, feeling the immaculate vibes that they've had all offseason. By the time you get to week 18, Packers have had a successful year. They're looking the playoffs straight in the face. But the Bears have learned how to play together. And they're not amazing, but they've grown to be competent. The run defense of the Bears has improved. Justin Fields learns how to use his wide receivers in addition to his legs. And Green Bay inevitably shoots themselves in the foot. The Packers have squeaked out some wins over the course of a very up and down inconsistent season. But here the youth trips them up, and they fall to the Bears to close out the regular season, and the Bears break their 9-game losing streak to the Green Bay Packers. Ultimately, though, the Packers finish the season with a record of 9-8, and quite possibly sneak in as a wild card team. Now, you're thinking, you really going to tell me that the Packers moved on from Aaron Rodgers? They're going to be a playoff team this year. Yeah. It's entirely possible. You know how I was saying with the Giants kind of did this? Oh, there we go, on camera. It's a little weird. But how they kind of are going to even out. The roster got better, but their luck is going to decrease. Well, last year, the Green Bay Packers were one of the most underachieving teams in football. And I think you can make the argument, or at least I'd entertain them, that the Packers are better this year. That they've had addition by subtraction, given how last year went. So let's just say, overall, that, let's say that you don't buy into that theory. Let's say that you believe that the Green Bay Packers are a worse roster right now than they were last year. They also were one of the most frustrating and at times unlucky teams in football last year. So again, let's do that. And basically the Packers are going to wind up right where they were last year. To me, though, the difference this year is we're going to flip the script on one of those games and become a 9-8 team instead of an 8-9 team. Book it now, 9-8 Green Bay Packers. Now, I'm not going to touch too much on this, but here's the deal. I wanted to address this. Yesterday was Father's Day. Beautiful day for so many people. Jordan Love was currently in, I believe, Paris. He was in France. Regardless, he was at a quarterback camp. And while he was there, a French Chicago Bears fan went up to him and said, "Hey, You know, we were hoping for Justin Fields to be here. Justin Fields couldn't be here. We got Jordan Love instead. Could you just put out a little video saying, hey, French Bears fans, happy Father's Day or something? You know, add Go Pack Go, whatever you want to do, right? Just take the phone and do it. And Jordan said, yeah, sure. He said, happy Father's Day to all the Bears fans out there. Go Pack Go. Okay. Packer fans, a lot of them, immediately jumped on that and said, he's saying he's going to own the Bears, just like Rodgers did. Look at that. And Bears fans immediately went, wait, he said Happy Father's Day. Does that mean that he's saying that the Bears are his father? Ha! That idiot screwed himself. Okay, here's the thing. The guy who posted the original video posted it. Then, places like Barstool, other big national media conglomerates that frankly don't answer to anyone, picked up on the quote and ran with it. And they put out all of their graphics with just Jordan Love's face on it, right? And then the quote of what he said. And it spread like wildfire. Packers fans did it too. Bears fans did it. Everyone did it. And all the while, the dude in France who actually gave Jordan Love his phone put out reply after reply. Go look at his profile. Go look into this if you're on Twitter. Put out reply after reply to all these people sharing it going, hey, that's not what this was. He wasn't even meant, like he wasn't even trolling. I asked him to put out a nice message to Bears fans and he obliged because he's a nice person. And then his little dash of like, go Pack Go at the end, that was the humor. I thought he was great. And then he posted a picture of himself with Jordan Love. And you know what got way less play than all of the memes or whatever put out by the huge national channels that didn't even bother to verify the video, reach out to the guy who took the video? Nah, all of that got way more play. Instead of the guy who actually, did it. I'm tired of it. Even Barstool Sports, one of their writers, put out an article saying that Jordan Love's IQ, or that hoping because this insult didn't work, that fictitious insult that the Love didn't even try to do, he put out that he hopes Love's football IQ is higher than his real IQ. Leave it to Barstool, of all places, to not actually vet an article that they're going to put out, right? I'm tired of this nonsense. We all should be. And what we can do is just be smarter about it. Stop giving in to these clickbaity bullcrap headlines. Go look where the headline came from. Because as I saw it spreading around with like wildfire through Twitter yesterday, if you would have just clicked on the dude who originally put out the video, you'd see him trying to calm everyone down. And then this poor guy also had to eventually delete it because he felt as though it misrepresented Jordan Love. We all can be better, and we can all stop buying into this bullcrap. Be a little smarter, and remember that context does matter. No one should be coming after Jordan Love's IQ because he chose to be nice. I'll be back on Wednesday with more. We'll see how the week turns. We'll see what news there is. Got a few topics kind of marinating right now that'll be on their way out soon. Hope you had a wonderful day today. I'll be back Wednesday. And as always, go Pack Go.